Hello everyone, today is the 20th of August 2024 and I'm going to discuss two things today. I in the morning woke up, was having my cup of coffee and my telephone, the feed from wherever news come from, I see two videos. And one is about Richard Medhurst, who is a YouTuber, and he is an accredited journalist in the UK, saying that last Thursday he was arrested at Heathrow Airport, and he tells us what happened, and he was released 24 hours later, but the experience was actually quite frightening, obviously. The second one was about some traditional nuns who are being practically persecuted by Bergoglio in the Vatican, and he wants them to be re-educated, whatever. These are traditional nuns. We know about what this so-called Pope is doing to traditional Catholics everywhere. So anyway, so I thought, okay, so goodness gracious, are we being attacked from everywhere? I don't want to dwell in depressing thoughts and so on. And I thought, okay, so my mind went to two things. One, Macbeth. And the other one was about an incident that happened about 25 years ago, which I didn't know anything about, and I'll tell you, is regarding two historians, British historians. One is Richard J. Evans, who wrote these 3 volumes about the history of Germany in the 30s, in 3 volumes, and another historian who wrote the first book. He has written many books, but the first one was in the 1970s. His name is David Irving. And I didn't know anything about this polemic that led to a trial and so on. I'll talk about that a little bit later. But regarding Macbeth, I was thinking, let me see, where am I? Let me look at my notes here, so that I don't, I wrote just 1 or 2 little things. That the story of Macbeth, good struggles forward, but evil is all pervasive. Reduced to its plotline, Macbeth sounds like a crime doesn't pay sort of melodrama, but it is less concerned with the uncovering of the crime to others than with the uncovering of the criminal to himself. Yes. So the play, we need to go back to Shakespeare, perhaps, if you can go back and reread it. The play is the discovery of the anatomy of evil. Obviously, Macbeth is not the only play where Shakespeare talks about evil. Probably most of them are. But here, evil is, for once and without any doubt, larger, more fascinating, more effective than the pallid representation of good. That is what I wrote this from the New Penguin Shakespeare, the introduction to it. Quote, Good things of day begin to droop and drowse, while night's black agents to their praise do rouse. So Macbeth falls, but does not do so primarily because of the power of his enemies. His black tyranny produces its own self-destruction. We know that it always ends like that. Is it arrogance? Is it whatever it might be? It's always self-destructive at the end. So good struggles forward in the world of Macbeth, but evil is all-pervasive. The whole land lies under his power. Good men die or flee, but even in flight they cannot escape from his power. They are all walled in the suspiciousness and the isolation of the individual. They do not know for sure what other men may mean, or what is true or false anymore. Fair may be foul. They must guard their tongues. But eventually suspiciousness, that sense that the individual cannot move by himself, gradually gives way to the knowledge of mutual dependence of national identity and, in this case, of divine blessing. Sharing comes as a kind of holy cure for suffering. And the malaise that had spread from Macbeth into his subjects, the inability to trust one another in society, the need to conceal one's own thoughts, to, in the words of Lady Macbeth, to look like the innocent flower, but be the serpent, she says. That is checked here, and then the plague is driven back to the single castle and the single man. Only when he is dead, his head on a pole, is time free. Malcolm is the medicine. Macbeth is the disease, a social and psychological disease. His infection spreads outside his own mind and into the minds of others. And at the same time, he is himself obviously the first victim, but obviously also the victimizer of others. But if he is himself a victim, how was he infected in the first place? And this has to be tackled on a social and psychological plane. At first he's a great warrior, involved in bloody battles, but a hero. But we are meant to be aware that this potential for destruction held inside the frame of human morality, that is very easy to snap. And Lady Macbeth, oh my goodness, Lady Macbeth. Lady Macbeth. Come, you spirits that tend on mortal thoughts, unsex me here. Unsex me here. In other words, revoke my femininity. This is interesting. You know the beef I have with women leaders who want to be like men. And their problem is that playing a man's game and pretending to be a man, you're always going to lose at a man's game. And because of that, they have to become nasty and angry. Most of them are. Almost thinking that that will do instead of intelligence. It's not the same thing. Anger does not make you more intelligent. But she says, unsex me here, oh my goodness, and fill me from the crown to the top toe. Sorry, unsex me here and fill me from the crown to the toe, top full of direst cruelty. May thick my blood. May thick my blood. Well, you see, poison her own soul so that she can kill Duncan without feeling remorse. That is what she's asking for. Make thick my blood. In Shakespeare's time, people believed that poison could thicken the blood. When she implores the spirits to make thick her blood, she is asking them to make her less human or less humane. For her to lose those fundamentally human traits of compassion or kindness. So that she doesn't want to feel the remorse. Make thick my blood. Stop up the access and passage to remorse, that no compunctious visitings of nature shake my fell purpose, nor keep peace between the effect and it. Come to my woman's breasts, and take my milk for gall. Change the milk in my breasts for gall. Oh my goodness. Time to reread Shakespeare. Okay. Let me go now to another topic. I was listening to a discussion. Actually, the person introducing the subject is a priest, and he's a historian. This was in Spanish, by the way, in one of the Spanish-speaking YouTube things. And he was interviewing another historian who wrote a book about Germany in the 30s. They talked about his book. I'm not going to discuss it. But then they started, they were going to discuss the work of the English historian, Richard J. Evans, who wrote a trilogy. I think it was between 2003 and 2008, 3 volumes: The Coming of the Third Reich, The Third Reich in Power, and The Third Reich at War. Okay, and this historian who's being interviewed is discussing these books. He found the 3 books, and they're going to do several videos on it, several lectures on it. And this particular time they were discussing only volume 1. And he points out that it is really very well written. It's worth reading, and there is a lot to learn from there. He points out a few things that to a Spaniard is always very evident, and that is that whenever you have to bring up the issue of Catholicism, the Vatican, Spain, you can see the English mind there. And you will not notice it, but from other cultures you do. It is a very sort of English, you can see it straight away. But anyway, he says that it is worth reading and studying, lots to learn there and so on. And then in the middle of this discussion, he says, of course, he's famous because of that, not only because of that, he is a scholar at Cambridge University, but I think it was in the 1990s, he became very famous because of a famous trial between another historian, David Irving, who wrote a book in the 70s about Hitler, or the coming of Hitler, or something like that, or Hitler's war, something like that. And my goodness, he became unpopular. Is very light. I mean, they just came for him because he was saying things that, like, the number of people killed perhaps wasn't accurate, this and that. Oh my goodness. So he was accused of anti-Semitism and all kinds of things. Okay. And what happened was that another woman, an American woman, a Jewish woman, what was her name? Deborah Lipstadt, wrote a book saying that she was the first one actually who came up with the word Holocaust. Okay, of course the word Holocaust always existed. It means sacrifice by fire, but referring to what happened. She was the first one to use it at the time. And for those who disagreed with whatever it might be, not that you denied it, but that you even question, in this particular case, numbers or something, to use the noun for the verb to deny, which has now extended to just about everything. But okay, so this historian, David Irving, actually took the publisher, Penguin, I believe, to court because she had accused him of being such and such. He lost the case. And I thought, as I was listening to this, I said, I don't know anything about that. I didn't hear about this famous case. A film was made afterwards. And I said, what was that about? And I realized that I was at the time in the United States, perhaps having my babies, and I wasn't paying attention what was going on in the world. So I researched it a little bit. And I found several things. David Irving there was apparently a Twitter post saying that he had died. No. He had to reply, no, I'm still around. He's very advanced in years, probably in his late 80s or 90s now. But I found some things about this case, and I found an article. By The Guardian that is going to tell you, this is about 7 years old, this article, okay? But it gives us the whole thing about this controversy. And I'm going to read it to you. The film was called Denial. And this article by The Guardian is written by Harriet Swain. Richard Evans, the film Denial shows there is such a thing as truth. The historian, a key player in the libel case involving Holocaust denier David Irving, talks about Trump, Goebbels, and why he agrees with John Bercow. Towards the end of Denial, the film released in cinemas this month, the lead character, played by Rachel Weisz, argues passionately that historical truth exists. Quote, "Slavery happened. The Black Death happened," she says. "Elvis is not alive." It is a point that historian Richard Evans, president of Wolfson College in Cambridge, provost of Gresham College in London, and a key player in the events that inspired the film Denial, has been making for most of his professional life. It is also something that, he argues, has become even more important in the era of alternative facts, in inverted commas, and Donald Trump. But it is not always straightforward. Before writing the screenplay for Denial, David Hare, the writer of the script, spent 2 hours quizzing Evans, an expert on Nazi Germany, about his part in the 2000 libel trial on which the film is based. Evans was an expert witness in the case, taken by the maverick historian David Irving against Deborah Lipstadt, an American academic who had called Irving a Holocaust denier and accused him of falsifying history. According to Evans, quote, "As he got up to go, David Hare said, 'I have interviewed a number of people about the trial and everyone seems to have a different point of view.'" Evans thought the film might therefore end up showing the action from lots of different perspectives, but in the end, wisely, he believes, Hare chose to focus on the experience of Lipstadt and her struggles with her legal team's insistence that she should not give evidence but leave them to prove that her allegations were true. Whatever the different views of the trial, the fact is that her defense was successful. The judge's name was Judge Charles Gray, in the British High Court. He died in 2022. So the judge found Irving to be a Holocaust denier, anti-Semite and racist who had deliberately misrepresented and manipulated historical evidence and ordered him to pay more than £2 million in legal costs. Evans, who had been employed to troll with a couple of assistants through Irving's work, had never read any of his writings before. Quote, "It's of no interest to academic historians, all empirical narrative with no real ideas in it." End of quote. And says they were repeatedly astonished by the falsifications and distortions they found. To keep up the tension, the film suggests the trial was in the balance. Quote, "But that wasn't quite accurate," says Evans, "because the defense knew from the beginning that he would win. The only question was, by how much?" Proving it, nevertheless, took Evans 3 years, during which he produced a 740-page report and was cross-examined for more than a week by Irving. David Irving was defending himself in court, who represented himself. It was stressful, he says, because he constantly had to watch out for Irving distorting his words. In the film, all this is reduced to a single but pivotal courtroom scene. The dialogue in the film is based entirely on transcripts from the trial, but Evans says John Sessions, who plays him, delivered the words much better than he did at the time. One legacy of being involved in the trial was that Evans became convinced of his duty to engage with the world outside academia. Another was a file full of obscene hate mail, all of which with an eye on the historical record he has kept. While he has not so far experienced any abuse as a result of the film, he acknowledges that he has stirred up anti-Semites. Earlier this month, leaflets referencing the film and in support of Irving were left on cars around Cambridge University, directing readers to a Holocaust denial website. Nevertheless, he insists, quote, "The film is bad for Holocaust deniers and it's bad for Mr. Irving. It underlines again the evil of Holocaust denial." He also hopes it will convince people watching it that there is such a thing as truth and you can discover it. His book, In Defense of History, published in 1997, famously challenged the postmodernist rejection of objectivity that had become increasingly popular in the 1980s and 90s, a time, he points out, when many of Donald Trump's team were students. I think, he says, that affected a generation of university graduates in the States, he says. Evans' own interest in history was sparked as a young boy living on the borders of East London, where he saw the remains of bombed-out homes, the wallpaper still clinging to ruined walls. War and its aftermath were what his parents, a teacher and a bank clerk, and politicians talked about, and he became fascinated by why it happened, who made it happen. He also liked writing. He wrote about the exploits of his model soldiers and even wrote 3 or 4 novels before deciding he did not have the imagination to invent things. He always needed to return to facts. By the time he went to Oxford, the first in his family to go to university, he knew he wanted to be an academic. It was a time when German history was just warming up, as Germans began talking about the past and reflecting on the roots of Nazism. He studied for a doctorate on the feminist movement in Germany, for which he learned German, and taught at the University of Stirling and East Anglia and Birkbeck College in London, before successfully applying to be Regius Professor of History at Cambridge. Meanwhile, he was writing book after book, including an acclaimed 3-volume history of the Third Reich. His studies of 1930s Germany have suggested parallels with the global political turmoil of the past few months, he says. This article was written in 2017. He's referring to Brexit. While the current context is different, no shadow of the First World War, less acceptance of political violence. If you ask a different question about how democracies die, you can see some parallels. And he goes on to explain. Trump's contempt for constitutional propriety and for the rule of law, and his hatred of the free press rang particularly alarm bells, as did his willingness to dismantle international agreements. Evans points out that one of the first things Hitler did when he came to power was to abandon the League of Nations. You can put quotes by Joseph Goebbels, the Nazi propaganda chief, about what he called the Jewish lying press and how it would be closed down when the Nazis came to power, side by side with quotes by Team Trump, and they look almost exactly the same, he says. Like Trump, Hitler chose to rule with a team of close allies. The democratic roots of the Weimar Republic were also much deeper than is often assumed, which means a secure democracy such as America, could be similarly vulnerable. The most worrying question in America, says Evans, is, are the institutions going to stand up to the assault they are being subjected to by Trump? It's a little bit dated. Evans says he is by nature optimistic. Good. But at the moment, I think we are going through dark times. This is true on both sides of the Atlantic. Since the Brexit vote, he has had to reassure the students at his postgraduate college, who come from all over the world, that whatever else happens, they will continue to be welcome. He is concerned for the future of British universities if they are starved of the international networks on which science and scholarships thrive. And he worries that Britain's dominance of literary history, from which he says many countries outside Britain get an understanding of their own histories, could also be under threat. And then there is the issue of lying. Politicians have always told lies, says Evans, it's just that nobody cares now. He argues that academics and journalists have a particular duty today to stand up for truth, and he believes the fight back is beginning. He admires Elizabeth Warren, the American academic and Democratic politician who has consistently stood up to Trump. Well, yes, she did. Can I interrupt here a little bit? Because she did, but that is because the truth is that Bernie Sanders was winning a lot of votes, yes, during the primaries. And so they wanted, the DNC, the Democratic National Party, did want Hillary Clinton to win, right? So they asked all the other 6 or 7 contenders to stand down, okay? But they ask Elizabeth Warren to stay in. Why? Because she would split Bernie Sanders' vote. Okay, the left, as it were, the old-fashioned left, wanted Bernie Sanders. Okay, so by Elizabeth Warren staying there, she would split that between the old-fashioned left and the woke and the feminist vote. That was the reason why she stayed in. I think I should just say that, okay, as an explanation. Anyway, he also supports petitions and demonstrations against Trump's state visit to Britain, does Mr. Evans. Quote, I'm absolutely with John Bercow, he says, referring to the Commons Speaker's speech, saying that Trump should not be allowed to address Parliament because of his racism and sexism. And while Denial, the film, is scrupulous in making the case that facts should triumph over emotion, Evans says emotions have their place. Seeing elderly people in the public gallery during the libel case with their sleeves rolled up and Auschwitz numbers tattooed on their arms was undeniably moving, he says. One has to be passionate about the truth. Okay, so this is the reason why I brought this is if you can look up, if you're interested in this, if you can look up this controversy, because David Irving actually was he was asked to pay £2 million in damages to the lady, to Deborah Lipstadt, and he had to declare bankruptcy. And the whole of the universe came on top of him because of all those accusations. Okay, when he was trying to defend himself, he was, I don't know, you'll have to make up your mind. I think he was trying to make the point that he wasn't denying anything. He was just querying certain aspects of the story. but anyways, it is intriguing. I haven't seen the movie. I don't know whether we can find it anywhere, but I think this story is fascinating. And the reason why I bring it up is because if you have something to say, whether it is as an individual or if you write a book as a historian, because he was very much acclaimed as a historian until then, and even afterwards, although he found it difficult to sell his books and so on, so he had to publish them himself. I found one video of Christopher Hitchens defending his right to write that book, especially since he went through all the documents, the archives here in England. The archives in Germany are closed. You can't look at them. But he said, but they didn't realize, the people who closed them, that the copies of all those conversations, documents, and so on, they have them here in England too, because they were actually getting all the information. The Germans didn't know that the British were getting all that information. Okay, so he had access to a whole bunch of documents, and anyway. So as a historian, he's writing with what he believes is evidence for him to doubt a few things about the the formal story. And Hitchens says that if you put your evidence forward and so on, you argue your case, then you should be able to write it and leave it out there but no, the whole work just came on him. I don't know what happened afterwards. If anyone can add something in the comments about this story, and about the trial especially, if you remember it, please share it with us, because I'm actually very interested in what happened here. Anyway, I'll leave you with that thought, and again, thank you. Oh, I have to tell you something. I never ever speak about this, but in my channel, right at the always at the very end, in the instruction box, I put something like, if you want to support my channel, Rumble, Twitter, I don't know, and then I give you buy me a coffee, PayPal, whatever. Okay, I have never explicitly asked you to donate to me. I think that if you want to do that, you don't need me to remind you, But I'm telling you, what happened was that someone sent me an email saying, what you have here doesn't work. And I went to check, and it doesn't. I don't know why, because they used to. But, it went, if you clicked before, it would go to an error, this thing doesn't exist, and so on. So I'm just wondering whether some people have tried to send me money and I wasn't receiving it. So anyway, I repaired that, and I think if any of you are interested and graceful enough to contribute, I just want you to know that if you encountered any difficulties, it should be working now. And I'm sorry, I'm kind of apologizing about saying this almost, but I just wanted to let you know. Thank you so very much for listening to me. Thank you. Bye-bye.